Hi, my name is John Bullock, and it's about 5 to 12 on the 24th of March 2020, and we are all in lockdown. Where I should have been was at the Crystal with the Ricolite team, talking about circular economy, and for my own little bit, to be challenging the UK lighting industry to become more sustainable. I thought, well, what a waste not to be talking about that. So even though I'm not in London and even though there's nobody at the Crystal, let's talk about the challenge that the UK lighting industry will have to become more sustainable. So let's just switch over to some slides, shall we? There we are, and that's what it is. Thing to remember is that the Lighting in the Circular Economy Conference isn't cancelled, it's postponed. We are all keeping our fingers crossed that come the 22nd of October, we will all be down at the Crystal. What I can't imagine is that my talk on the 22nd of October is going to be the same as the talk that it would be today. So you're kind of getting two for the price of one. So enjoy this one. So where are we? Challenging the lighting industry to become more sustainable is a little bit by drawing the short straw. I'd like to thank Nigel Harvey and the team at Ricolite for giving me this one. Everyone else is talking about the circular economy, which is very up for people at the moment, and I get the rather more awkward topic of talking about how we should all be doing things better than what we're doing at the moment. But then again, it's something I've been saying for a lot of years, so I get the chance to do it again. How's that? Here's our problem. Our problem is time. It's as simple as that. Time is running out, and as far as this talk is concerned, I've got 20 minutes to save the earth. So let's see what we can do in those 20 minutes. I'm going to focus on one organisation, and that organisation is the RIBA, because as the lighting industry, we have to look beyond ourselves to see where the influences are, what is going to change in the way that we do things, what will draw us towards a more sustainable future, which if we're not basically prepared to go there ourselves. And the RIBA has been doing an awful lot of work. And let's not forget, we complain about the quality of lighting installations and the quality of procurement. The RIBA complain about exactly the same things, except they're talking about their entire buildings. So they've got work to do. Three interesting documents have come out from the RIBA recently. One distinctly talks about sustainability and what it is that they're doing. The second one, their 10 principles for procuring better outcomes. That's actually very important to us because that will change the way that pre-qualification questionnaires get put together. And we can expect PQQs in the future to be much more loaded towards things like the circular economy and things like sustainable practices. That all gets reinforced with the publication of their new 2020 plan of work. And sustainability gets a section in that plan of work all by itself. So that's kind of the atmosphere, the environment that we're going to be faced with as we come out of this sort of current hiatus. The interesting thing in there as well, that architects believe they can influence the sustainability of project outcomes, and the reason they believe that is because they're the ones who are in conversations with clients before people like us get a chance to talk about it. Their sustainability platform comes from the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and the RIBA have put together its own document on sustainable development and how that can be achieved in practice. There are 17 goals that the United Nations have come out with. Some of these things we can have an impact on, others it's a bit of a bigger picture. I'm not suggesting that anyone in the lighting industry can solve poverty in one fell swoop, and we're probably not best placed to deal with clean water and sanitation. But we know there's only one existential challenge at the moment into the way that we do business, And of those 17, that is climate action. If we do not address climate action, we do not have a world that can actually work to our benefit. You know, we talk about the earth is in crisis. The earth is not in crisis. The humans on the earth are in crisis. And what we need to be looking at is what we can do to move things to a better place, quite simply. There are 10 principles in the United Nations Global Compact about sustainability and human rights and labour. Obviously, very, very important things, but there we have our environment, and tucking in nice and neatly on the end of it, anti-corruption. Let's not forget that we need to be doing these things properly. But if we play the environment card here, this is all about undertaking initiatives, as it says, to promote greater environmental responsibility, that we all need to be finding our ways, our own personal ways, our own industry-wide ways, our own national ways of promoting and creating greater environmental responsibility in the things that we do. That's what it's all about. What architects can do, what architects believe they can do as regards the environment is set out here. And there's that second one. That's the one that intrigues me, because what they're doing, and this really also comes out of their plan of work, because they are reinforcing in the plan of work the input of specialist consultants. And I'll say that's us. So exchanging information with other construction industry professionals, contractors and clients. One thing we can be sure of, an architect may not be able to choose its client very easily, but it can certainly decide who it wants to work with. So if it's working towards sustainable ends, it will want to be working with sustainable partners. It's actually obligatory that within that chain of expertise, that every link in that chain has got to have proper quality sustainable credentials. So we are obliged, if we want to come and play with these guys, we need to be out there and we need to be looking in the same direction. Which of course means that for many, many people, you go, oh no, not something else, please, I don't care. So this is where this talk gets a little bit tricky, because all of us in this room are hypocrites. None of us are doing the job properly. All of us are taking advantage of our privilege of being in the northern hemisphere, in the richest part of the world, having exploited the rest of the world for centuries. And it is very difficult for us to think in different terms. And so what we see here is all of us, me included, to some extent. But we've got noisy neighbours, and those neighbours are getting noisier and noisier, and their name is well known. And we can already see it. Climate crisis, climate change, environmental pressures are not something that is in the future, are not something that might, if we're not careful, happen to us in 50. They're now, they're here. These things are happening more frequently, and they're happening all around the world. They're happening in the UK, they're happening in every country. Weather events, flooding, weather events, drought, weather events, wildfires, weather events, pestilence, locust swarms in Africa as I speak, which are destroying crops. And sitting right at the heart of that is that particular horse person of the apocalypse, war and strife. Because everything that we see here means that we are forced to face up to a horrible fact that millions of people can't live where they want to live. They can't live there because they can't grow food. They can't live there because the environment is such that it is almost untenable for human habitation. And we see it on if you like, on a local level. But at a local level, it only takes one house to be flooded for that to become a catastrophe for someone. So we are seeing a small island on the edge of a large ocean becoming a victim to climate events, which will just get worse and worse and worse. But we require food from the rest of the world, and food sustainability is becoming worse and worse and worse. So we have got a job to do. We've got a job to do now. Oh, and before we go any further, I'm in lockdown. Anybody who's watching this today or in the coming weeks is going to be in lockdown. It's already been mooted that coronavirus is actually a symptom of the way we have been exploiting the planet, and these diseases which are coming to us out of the jungles and out of the wild lands, however they get into the human stream, they are here because we are attacking natural environments that we do not understand, and in their own way those environments are attacking back. So things like SARS, things like the coronavirus, things like Ebola, all of those things have come out from what was a self-contained world and is no longer a self-contained world, because we have gone into that world in order to exploit it, and we have got the bad stuff coming back at us. So coronavirus does not live outside of this. Coronavirus is part and parcel of everything we're talking about. And it's mad, isn't it? And as the Mad Hatter said, time is drowning, hearts are burning, heads are rolling, nothing can save you now. Tick tock, tick tock. So what can we do? You go to the doctor, and the doctor's got the reports of your tests on the desk and says, inevitably, like the old story, there's good news and there's bad news. What would you like first? I think I'll take the bad news, because if there is good news, then I'd rather walk out of the door with the good news in my head. So what's the bad news? Well, the bad news is that it's terminal, and nothing can be done, or very, very little can be done, unless you change your ways dramatically. Good grief. Well, if that's the bad news, how can there be any good news? Well, you're not dead yet. And we're not dead yet. We are in a position where we could be looking at the end, but are there things that we can do to help improve the situation? Can we attack the overconsumption that we are, the wrongful consumption, should we say, of planetary resources that can put us into a better place? It's of course interesting and very, very challenging that with the world in lockdown, we are seeing such a dramatic reduction in carbon dioxide going into the atmosphere. And at the moment, these are early days for all of us, because this is the first day of the UK lockdown, and we're being promised 12 weeks, 3 months. It could be 6 months. It could be 2 years. We have no idea. But what we do know is that we have never been in this place before. So the challenge is absolutely enormous. And yet, perhaps there is something to be learned from this, because if we can find a better way of adjusting to a world that works for us, in that we can work for ourselves within that world, what are the things that we could be looking at now that might make a difference? So the low-hanging fruit. We have got to stop producing carbon dioxide. It's as simple as that. Everything that we do, we need to look at it and go, where's the carbon dioxide in that? So where does our electricity come from? Are we buying it from renewables, from companies that are offering guaranteed renewable generation? Are we using our own solar generation? Are we got wind power? Where are we going? It is time to move away from fossil fuels. We really, really have got to do that. And we can make that choice now because there are supplies out there, and we can shift our electricity consumption across to a renewable, non-carbon intense source. What about the people that we're working with? What about the companies that we work with? What influence can we have over them? If a company comes to you and says, you know, we've just set this up, and by the way, all our electricity is green, and we think that's very important, well, maybe those kind of people deserve a hearing. On the other hand, people who are delivery companies, perhaps, who insist on maintaining a diesel fleet, maybe we should be marking their cards for them. It's time to shift. We have got to get rid of carbon dioxide. What about our investments? This is an interesting one because we hear two conflicting stories at the moment. One of the conflicting stories, one side of the story, is that huge investment companies are still backing fossil fuels to the tunes of billions and billions and billions of pounds. But on the other hand, it is getting much more difficult to get investors to invest into real hardware, real infrastructure for fossil fuel projects. It is very difficult to get a coal-fired power station built today, unless you happen to be an African country and you've got China knocking on your door, but that's a different story altogether. People have realized that there is probably no future. Ultimately, there has to be no future in fossil fuel electricity generation or fossil fuel oil production. So they are less likely to want to put their money into it. So that's a good side of things. The shift is happening, possibly, if we can do something. If we can say to our investment funds, the people who manage those investment funds, we want to get out of anything to do with fossil fuel extraction. It might just help tip that balance to move things away. And the opposite side of that, of course, is that we still need to invest. Investment still needs to happen. We can just be investing in the things that's going to save us rather than destroy us. And what about in-house? Do we have a policy on how our staff get around? We need exercise, guys. If we can we walk there? Can we take a bicycle? Can we take an e-bike? Because that's even better. Can we use forms of public transport rather than getting into our own motor cars? There is a strange situation happening at the moment that I think people looking outside, people are using their own motor cars as a form of self-isolation. I did it myself last week. We're not going to get on any of the plague expresses heading into London, so we're going to make journeys, if we make any journeys, in our own motor cars. That is a situation which needs to change. We already know this. It is all part of that. If we are driving along in a petrol car or a diesel car, that is not helping us. So what can we do? Can we start using public transport more? Can we, instead of driving, can we cycle? Instead of cycling, can we walk? It's all going to be better for us. And do we have to make the journey at all? The one thing that we're all learning, and I'm using the Zoom platform to record this, all of a sudden we're finding that we don't have to go out and see people. I'm having fantastic conversations across this platform every day of the week. And it could well be that this new technology, provided that the Zoom platform doesn't fall over, but this kind of technology can be one of the saviors for us. And then just the business of doing business. Are we being sensible in the way that we're using energy? Are we careful about the way that our own lighting works? Are we looking at the way that our heating, a very, very difficult problem, because in order for us to function well, we need to be in heated buildings when it's cold outside. But how does that heating work? It's not an easy answer, but how are we doing it? Plastic is its own subset these days, but it's coming out, it's oil, it's coming out from fossil fuels, and therefore it's something that we need to get out of the way and remove. Tightening controls on samples is actually part of the circular economy, just in case anybody has not picked that one up. if we can manage a way of not having as many fittings out there doing nothing other than sitting in my cupboard, then we can be a little bit more efficient in our attitude towards samples. Very much with this, it's about attitude. It's not a case of, oh, I can send them this because there'll be another one along in a minute. We have to say to ourselves, there isn't necessarily another one along in a minute. We need to work within the confines of what we've got. I'm mentioning siren voices here. This is important. Oh, look, there's a Tesla. We all want one of them, don't we? Entire countries, national governments are talking about the shift to electric cars because that is clearly the future. However, I came across this piece of sobering news. This is Professor Richard Harrington from the Natural History Museum in London and a few other geologists, and they just looked at what it would take if we were, at the snap of the fingers, we were to change all of the petrol and all of the diesel vehicles over to electric. And this is what he came up with. We'd need twice the annual production of cobalt just for the UK. We would need almost the entire world production of neodymium, and I can hardly say that, in the UK. 3/4 of the world's lithium production just for the UK, and at least half of the world's copper production. It suggests that it can't be done. It suggests that the electric car is a partial solution, but there is an attitudinal change that we need to look at, because one thing that we can't do is maintain the usage of those vehicles the way that we are at the moment. We will be sharing cars rather than owning cars. We will be getting on our bikes rather than getting in cars. We will be using Zoom conversations rather than physical meetings in order to reduce the amount of time we spend on wheels that actually will never exist, because the world does not have the resource to make all these things. Flying. I've joined the No Flying Club. That's me. So if anybody's listening who's thinking of inviting me over to China or, I don't know, Japan, India, France, Denmark, we need to find another way of getting there, guys, because this is my commitment. I will not be flying. Why not? Because we can just plant trees, can't we? Isn't that carbon offsetting part? You know, it salves our conscience. This guy Kevin Anderson, he's a professor in Manchester and Uppsala and various things, and he's one of the leading voices. Lots of stuff on YouTube from Kevin Anderson, and that's what he said. Carbon offsetting is like paying poor people to diet for us. I keep looking at that and wondering whether that tea needs to be there, because I think it's more than just dieting. And the other siren voice, which is a bit of a weird one, because it's the one that says there's nothing that can be done. There's just too many people. Are there too many people? I think there are too many people. And I would recommend a book called 10 Billion, written by a guy called Stephen Emmett. Scariest book I've read since the last one. But not in terms of this climate crisis. Because here's the fact of the matter. The poorest half of the Earth's population only accounts for 10% of the CO2 emissions. It's us in the north who are causing the problems. It's not all the guys in the south. Kevin Anderson also said this, and here's a couple of numbers to think about. It only takes 10%, the world's richest 10%, to come down to our average, the European Union average, not the average of a tribes person in the middle of Africa, but the average European. The world's emissions would go down by 30%. This is a rich person's problem. And we must not forget that, because that's our problem, because we are relatively rich. So the low-hanging fruit, as best we can, we must learn to do less and we must learn to be more efficient in doing less. So, my friend, I know you don't care, and I know you don't want even to have to pretend to care, but I think the times they are changing, as the man said so many years ago, and it is time for us all to get on board. As William Blake never said, denial ain't a river in Egypt. But what he did say, it's an easy thing to sing in the tents of prosperity. And it is easy to sing in the tents of prosperity. But we have to do something different now. We're in the top 10 of countries when it comes to quality of children's health, and 133rd when it comes to delivering on emissions targets. We talk about the damage that's being done to children's health. We talk about air quality, but we do nothing about it. One of our tragedies. And there we are. 93% of the world's children under 15 are exposed to fine particulate matter above WHO air quality guidelines. Something must be done. It is symptomatic. Fine particulate matter is a consequence of non-sustainable living. Something must be done, because time is running out, and I think time has run out for me. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your attention. Is this the end?